Welcome to Artsplanations, the podcast that is for non-artists, artists, and everyone in between.
We talk about art and try to explain what we think about it, and as artists, why we think that way. We ask questions to try and bridge the gap between viewer and creator to make the art world more accessible to everyone.
Good morning, art lovers. Andrew here, and I guess that's not how our opening is going to be.
No, that was so good. You've just never done it that way. It was like a smooth jazz radio. Please leave all of this in.
Good morning, art lovers. Andrew here, and today with me as always is...
Joanna Bolsons.
And today we are recording in the wee morning hours at about 10 a.m., which is morning for us.
Yep, I took the day off. It feels great.
We both have big cups of coffee instead of big cups of wine, so this might be a little less tangential of an episode. Probably not.
No. We might pronounce things better, though.
That might happen. But today's episode, we're going to talk about animals in art. Before we do talk about animals in art, this is a topic that we could have, we could honestly have a separate podcast devoted strictly to animals in art.
Yeah, because, not only the symbolism, but just the representation throughout the years, because, if you look at the pug in the 1800s versus the pugs we think of today, they've changed vastly.
Yeah, the way that you can track breeds of dogs in art, or, the way that the depiction of animals have changed, and, the significance of them. It's a category that is too vast for, us to focus in on specifics, the thing we don't do is focus in on specifics. We like to keep broad brushstrokes. We just want to mention that up front, that we're just going to be talking, about some general ideas and concepts about animals in art.
And as an animal lover, I tend to bring them up in our normal conversations. So I'm really excited about this episode. Because I feel like every time we go to a museum, I gravitate towards, oh, look, there's a cat in this one. Or look at this anamorphic piece, So I'm really excited.
Anamorphic?
I was thinking of those books, Animorphs.
Instead of anthropomorphic.
Thank you. I also just couldn't remember the name.
I didn't know if, that was a word that I was like, wait, is anamorphic actually the term?
No.
So anthropomorphic is when you transform a creature, an animal, and give it human-like qualities.
Yeah.
It's something that happens in art a lot. But before we get into that kind of discussion, I did have a question I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
What is your favorite non-fantastical animal?
Probably cat.
Cat.
Non-fantastical.
Yeah.
So not mythical, not anything real-life animal.
Yeah, something you could get and hold in your hands.
Like Minky right in front of me.
So cat?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of a gimme, huh?
I think anybody who knows me knows cat, too. I don't have to walk them. They'll nap with me. They're really chill. Not hyper. What about you?
I've always been kind of partial to bears.
Yeah.
Big, furry. They seem like they should be nice, but they don't have to be.
I've seen this thing, I don't know if it's on Reddit or what, but they've zoomed in on crops of bear ears, and they're like, why are bears so dangerous? But they look like this. Because their ears are literally like teddy bear ears.
Yeah.
Really? I saw you more as like a lizard guy.
When it comes to animals, favorite animal, not really, no.
I guess I'm thinking of a pet for you. Because you're very much no, don't cuddle. No, don't. I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to have to clean up after you.
Right.
You're very much a terrarium kind of guy.
My favorite pet is the one that you have.
That you don't have to take care of.
Yeah, I get to play
you love
with
other
it.
People's animals.
Yeah, I get to play with it and get all the fun of, 10 seconds of interaction, and then I don't have to deal with it.
That's how I feel about kids.
Yeah, likewise. Which is why we are so good together.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess expanding on that question, what's your favorite animal representation in art?
Ooh,
do you have a favorite piece, or just in general?
before doing research on this, there was a Dur's Rabbit, or the Ermine in Da Vinci's Lady with an Ermine. Always kind of stuck out. There's a really good book called The Goldfinch that is based on, it's somewhat about a painting. It's not about the painting, it's just the painting is used as the title for the...
It's like the catalyst, right, of the story?
Yeah.
They just made that into a movie.
I haven't seen it, but it's a Donna Tartt book, I believe. So I would say that out of that, just because those are the ones that like I recognize. Yeah, it's Carol Fabritis from 1654, The Goldfinch. I've always liked those, just kind of traditional representations. The Dur's Rhinoceros, that's the other one. Yeah, Dur's Rhinoceros I always really liked just because it's that like personification of the old parable of the blind guy who's describing an elephant.
Yeah.
One grabs the trunk and says it's a snake. One grabs the leg and says it's a tree or whatever.
I wrote Dur's Rhinoceros down as well in my research. It's just like, for those who haven't seen it, Dur had never seen a rhinoceros, but this guy who had gone to the safari wanted, because Dur was such a great artist, his line work is incredible, he was describing the rhinoceros to him, said, I want you to draw this, people need to know what this looks like. And so he's saying that the skin is like armor. So Dur drew the rhinoceros skin like literal armor.
Yeah, it's like it has plate armor on.
Yeah, like a Spaniard conquistador kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, it's really well done, but when you know what a rhinoceros actually looks like, it's kind of funny. It's like if it was a characterization of a rhino.
Yeah, I mean, just that classic telephone game where one person's saying one thing to someone else and it's being described and you kind of lose. I mean, speaking of Dur's rendition of this rhinoceros, during that era, a lot of times you would get artists who would depict animals in bestialities, but they would never have seen the animals. They would only have descriptions from people like, I saw a giraffe, it's a snaky neck horse, or, something like that, and then they would depict them in these bestialities.
Well, like you said, describing the elephant, there are drawings where the elephants have like horns. Instead of a trunk, it's like a really long horn.
So you can get some wild interpretations of like what animals are. If you think of like manuscripts where there's just weird depictions of like human-faced animal creatures.
Well, my favorite were the medieval manuscripts, where they have like knights fighting snails, and they're either giant snails or like a herd of snails, and they haven't really completely figured out what the meaning behind it is, but there's a theory that the snails were a stand-in for Germanic Lombards. So, like, it was a little bit of racism in these manuscripts because they're trying to prove that the English were better than the Germanic. So, there's that. But then, my favorite theory is that it was the insulation of the ruling class. So, kind of like a Robin Hood theme. This knight is going to save us from the I just like scrolling train of thought. It was like the knights trying to save us from the unaware ruling class because they don't know the actual struggles of their common people. So that's my favorite theory on it.
Oh, really? Like, these ruling people are so dumb they think that we fight snails?
No. Like, the snail represents the insulated ruling class because the snail lives inside the shell.
Okay.
So the knight is kind of like knight in shining armor. He's going to be like the Robin Hood that's robbed from the rich to give to the poor kind of thing.
Really? Because I always figured the knights were part of the ruling class,
That's
right?
what I thought too. But again, like, one of the theories that I read when researching this, because I was like, I'm going to do the snails, like, because it just cracks me up when I see them, because it's always these knights fighting snails, and it probably is the Germanic theory, just because racism has been prevalent forever, but I really like the idea that it's the knight in shining armor fighting the insular ruling class. They're just these slimy snails that only care about their own, little shell, and it's actually that.
Huh. It's kind of interesting. Well, I mean, that does lead us to another thing, which is that there is, a symbolism that is attached to a lot of the animals when they're depicted in art. You might see, like, the Arnolfali Wedding, or, Lady with an Ermine by Da Vinci.
Because the ermine meant purity?
Right, it was seen as a symbol of, because of its, like, pure white coat that it would get, as, like, a symbol of, purity or chastity, I think. And then the dog would sometimes be seen also as, like, do you know what the dog was seen as? I know the rabbit was... Loyal companion. I know rabbits were often sometimes seen as a symbol of both promiscuousness
and lust,
or also because it was believed that they could asexually reproduce without a mate. So sometimes they were seen with the Virgin Mary as a sign of her overcoming having an immaculate birth of Christ.
I noticed that too, because Titian has a painting where Madonna is kind of like cradling. She's either cradling or she's gently petting a rabbit.
Yeah.
And it was that idea of, yes, lust is there, but she overcame it. She had an immaculate conception.
Right, which I always find the interpretation of what these symbolisms mean. It changes throughout history and changes from artist to artist. And we were talking about earlier, that bestiary was one of the tools that artists would use, so that they knew, like, oh, the rabbit means this, or oh, the snake means this. And so the robin and the swallow, they both have this bright kind of red plumage around the neck, and that represents new life. And so you'll see swallows sometimes appear, or robins appear in religious iconography as this representation of, like, the new life of Christ, or the blood that was shed to bring new life.
And I think animals, and then of course religious imagery in itself, go hand in hand, because religion was a very much driving force in art, because a lot of churches would commission artists to represent the stories in the Bible, because most people that were coming to church couldn't read themselves. So what a great way to get the stories across, and what a great way to integrate your religion into your everyday life than to establish these animals as parts of symbolism, parts of the biblical story. And not even just Christianity. I mean, it's in all religions. There's that one artist that did a piece, Madonna, with elephant dung, right?
Chrysophilia.
That animal waste itself is holy in his religion, so utilizing it in his artwork is just another way to use that symbolism. Yeah,
absolutely. And then also, if you look at, like, Eastern mythologies, or mythologies from other country, or religions from other parts of the world, not just Eastern, or not just Europe, you see, if you think about just the most basic Eastern story about, monkey and snake and tiger, or the Chinese zodiac even.
Exactly, yeah. The dragon is represented throughout their art history because it symbolizes royalty, power, all these different things, so they utilize it in their artwork as well. Unfortunately, I'm a white Westerner, so I don't know a whole lot, and I don't want to speak on it and get it wrong.
Right.
But, I mean, it is done. There's a reason why they made Mushu a dragon in Mulan. Like, they're trying to integrate that symbolism in a child's story as well.
When we talk about animals in art, that's probably, like, the most common thing that you would think about, like, oh yeah, animals they play this role as, a stand-in for certain moral or ideological themes to help, communicate with the viewer what this work is about. It's like the Arnolfali Wedding, all those little things, whether it's the fruit or the little dog, these all tie in to tell you a story about who that painting is about, and who you're looking at, and, like, the virtues that they extol. The this is done a lot in portraiture, especially traditional portraiture from the medieval and Renaissance era. A lot of times you'll see the sitter with, they might have a little puppy with them, or some kind of animal flying in the background. There'll be certain fruits and vegetables they'll be wearing, or they'll have even like a necklace of like an animal. They'll then, clue you in if you look at it and you understand the symbolism that, like, oh, it's talking about this sitter as being brave as a lion.
Yeah, specifically royals too, because they want to showcase how powerful they are, and why they make a good ruler is because they have all these virtues. The women would be holding a pomegranate or have a pomegranate on the table to show that they are able to bear a lot of children to expand the monarch, and then they might have that ermine or something else, maybe a dove or something to represent their purity. Unicorns, yeah. Unicorns were used a lot because like their horn was thought to be healing and magical, and because maidens were drawn to them, or they were drawn to maidens or something. So the whole knights saving the maiden kind of expanded this mythology. There's a lot of unicorns seen in medieval tapestries because that whole idea of maidenhood and the virtueness of the knight saving, like that whole, the stories that we think of now, like Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, and all that stuff, it's expanded over time from that.
Yeah, the unicorn shows up a lot because in medieval times, they didn't know that the unicorn wasn't a creature. It was widely believed that the unicorn was in fact an actual beast, that its horn could purify water. And in an era where disease and impure drinking water was just a thing of the times, that's why things like small beer, a lot of people drank slightly alcoholic beverages because the alcohol killed the bacteria. So it was always safe to drink, a beer that had like 1% alcohol as opposed to well water, which might be contaminated with who knows what. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of the unicorn's horn being able to purify that water was something that shows up a lot in, you can find actually chalices that are said to be made out of a unicorn horn. A lot of times they're like narwhal or ivory or something like that.
Yeah, elephant.
Yeah. And that tapestry you're talking about is actually it's a 4-panel tapestry at the Met. It's the tapestry of the unicorn.
It's beautiful.
It is, yeah. There's a bunch of really good art historical videos that are done by the curators of the Met that talk specifically about that tapestry and the symbolism of the unicorn in it and why it is such an important piece.
I went to school with a girl who thought unicorns were real. She legit thought that they existed, but they died in the flood. The Great Flood with Noah's Ark and everything. She thought they died because they refused to get on the boat. They wanted to play in the rain.
That's a Far Side comic.
Maybe her brother told her, but I remember in science class, she's like, no, they were real, but they didn't get on Noah's Ark. And we turned around and we were like, are you serious? And she straight up believed that.
I mean, if you're taught something.
Yeah. It's just anytime I hear unicorns, I think of Megan.
Well, bless her.
Also, getting into the mythology part of animals in art, I love Celtic mythology and just the idea of like corgis running around in the forest with the fairies holding on to their collars. Just that imagery just alone makes me so happy.
Why is that imagery, like, where does that imagery come from?
Celtic mythology.
So it's like actually part of the mythos that Fae ride corgis?
Yeah, Fae hold on to, because you know how they have that little roll on their neck?
Uh-huh.
The Fae hold on to that little roll and they ride corgis.
Interesting.
Maybe that's why I like them. We should get one. We should do that one. Making it fun.
Or we just play with someone else's and not have to deal with it. So, mythological animals in art show up even in traditional times. Also, if you think about contemporary art, you get strange creatures and beasts. If you think about like animation cartoons, which have, but honestly, when I was thinking about animals in art and contemporary sense, cartoons is immediately what I thought of. If you think about Looney Tunes or the Merry Melodies or Disney.
Yeah.
That idea of bringing these same stories and the same symbolism to a modern era or even a contemporary standpoint. I think that's like the best place to draw.
Well, it's such an easy pathway to get an adult story told to a child at a child level. Because when you think about it, humans and animals, we occupy the same planet, right? But we live in completely different worlds. The animal world is vastly different from the human world. Even for Minky, our pet, her day-to-day life, her experience of the world is vastly different from us. So what a great bridge for these adult themes to tell a child than to put it in an animal setting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not just for children, but also for adults. Think about... I'm trying to think of movies that have animals in them, like Free Willy.
But again, it's the child perspective.
Yeah. Or Jurassic Park. There's the adult perspective.
There, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is one of the ways that we now, as in the modern era, that we kind of consume this same idea of like symbolism in art through animals. It's something that I don't see it a lot in contemporary works so much. I think about, like, if I go to a gallery, they don't tend to show up as with that same force of symbolism that you would find in traditional, like, Renaissance style artworks, medieval artworks.
Well, I think it's because the style has changed, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definite... If you look at Dan Heskamp, his prints...
Yeah.
Animals are in that. The theme is vastly different. Still beautifully done.
Yeah.
Ross. Ross's symbolism in his prints. He's got the boar.
True. But I mean, thinking of, like, abstract expressions, I mean, Picasso's Guernica or his bull. Marc Chagall, he's got a couple bulls that are kind of abstracted. But, I mean...
So you're just talking about the symbolism itself? Or just
the use of animals in contemporary artwork. I don't see it a lot. If we go to Blue Star, or if we go to a museum, and we're looking at the contemporary wing of it, if you go to the contemporary wing of the Art Institute of Chicago, or even the San Antonio Museum of Art, and you walk through it, I don't see a lot of... If there is an animal represented in the work, it tends to be more of part of the narrative, like a literal part of the narrative, as opposed to a symbolic representation of something.
Well, I'm going to dispute you on that one, because there's Sarah Fox. She's been at Blue Star a couple of times. She does those puppets and those really graphic...
Yeah, I don't like her work.
I know you don't, but the point is she uses the fox and like it's a fox and then there's a rabbit, and they've been anthropomorphized. Is that the word?
Anthropomorphized.
Yeah. So the fox and the rabbit have been changed into almost humanoid creatures. They have breasts and they're very sexualized. And it's using that, we just talked about the rabbit as a symbol of lust, using that idea of female lust versus lust after a female. She's using it, I think, that same symbolism in a contemporary setting.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's completely gone. I'm just saying I don't see it as much.
Well, okay. Maybe you're just not looking.
Maybe.
I will agree that now that it's postmodern, post-contemporary, everything's very flat. I mean, can you really add symbolism to stuff like that? Like, could Andy Warhol have added symbolism to his pieces? Maybe by having, like, Marilyn wearing a specific necklace or something like that. But I think some pieces don't need it.
Yeah, I think also a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're in, like, a post-minimalist era where, we've kind of gone through that abstracting and that reducing stage of things, where even things that are built up, like, it seems like everything is reduced first down to its base elements and then kind of built on after that.
Hopefully we're at the stage now where we're going to start getting that back, because I'm not a fan of minimalism.
I like some of it.
Very few things do I like, and I feel like if you're going to take the time to make something, fill it up, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do miss the symbolism. I miss a large color palette. I miss a lot of the richness that you get in those classical works.
Yeah.
I can still appreciate some contemporary work, some postmodern, some minimalist, but I definitely gravitate towards the older medieval, older Renaissance work, Rococo, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Just, even as he's been talking, I just thought of another artist who does use animals and symbolism in his work, and that's Willie Berger. He does wood-carved figurative work, and sometimes there will be animals, and he's used them to talk about like ecology and changes in environment.
Well, Banksy uses the rat. I just remembered.
True. Maybe there are more out there. It's just not something that like I'm not looking for it, so I don't see it.
Yeah. Well, Gorilla Girls, they dress up like literal gorillas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be it. Just not looking for it.
Yeah.
And like you said, like you didn't know about Orientalism until you went to school.
True.
So seeing that, you can point that out now, like everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are blind spots everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I like to talk about things.
Yeah. I was really excited researching this because I looked up Lisa Frank, and that was just absolutely my childhood. Priscilla the kitty. She was this really ornate Persian cat that I had on all my folders, had the backpack, my lunchbox. I was really excited doing research on this because I was like, yeah, Lisa Frank. Because that whole just vomiting of neon color was total 90s childhood, late 80s, early 90s childhood. And even the storybooks that my mom would get me, I would always gravitate towards the ornate cat feasting at this huge banquet hall full of food.
Yeah, I mean, even think about like zoo books or highlighters. You know, getting those books as kids too, and those were usually illustrated and have like fun, happy, anthropomorphized animals.
I'm gonna laugh if we have that word completely wrong.
Right, that should be the title. Anthropomorphication, a word we can't say. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in doing research for this, I found a statue that I really like of it's called the Geyer Anderson cat, and it is a statue that was looted from Egypt by the British of the goddess Bastet. But it's this really great bronze of this cat statue, but it's got a nose ring and earrings, and this little pendant of a scarab that's worked into it. Super cool, just like a nice, simple, yet elegant depiction of this animal, this cat god, that just kind of stood out.
I do like whenever somebody sees my work or sees your work and they're always like, oh, I could never do that. I'm like, yeah, you can. It just takes practice. And they're like, no, you're born with that. I will pull up Picasso's cat. It's not Picasso. It's Van Gogh's cat. He painted this cat. This poor cat is just terrible. It looks almost human. Like the face is all wrong. It's just a terrible rendition. And I'm always like, look at this. This is Vincent Van Gogh.
Yeah.
You can do better than this. It just takes practice.
Yeah, I mean, another one that I think of when you think of like cats that look a little derpy is Surprise by Henry Rousseau. It's a tiger in the jungle, but it has these like large eyes and its mouth is open, but it doesn't have whites, it's yellows.
He's the one that I always get confused with Gauguin. Rousseau's the one that I don't like, just on a personal.
I mean, I don't like Gauguin either.
I like him. I prefer him over Rousseau.
Really?
Yeah. Rousseau's just completely flat in his work.
Yeah.
There's no brush stroke, nothing. And like you said, that tiger's really derpy. And then there's that one with the sleeping woman. Yeah. There's that one where she's like sleeping in a nightscape thing. I don't know. It just looks awful. There's a tiger in that one too.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of either of their works, to be perfectly honest, but I prefer Rousseau over Gauguin. Just everything about Gauguin kind of irks me.
I prefer his work over Rousseau's work. They're both terrible people.
Oh, really? I don't know much about Rousseau himself.
He's the one that, like, kind of elbowed his way into the salons. He never actually studied anywhere or took classes. Picasso became friends with him, and he was given that, what's it called? Where you're an untrained painter.
Outsider?
Not outsider, but in the same kind of vein. I don't know. Primitive. Primitive. He was given, like, he's just a primitive artist. Like, no, he doesn't try. And I think he's the one that left his wife. No, that's Gauguin.
Yeah, that's Gauguin, yeah.
They're both just terrible. Rousseau lied about being in the service and said, yeah, I saw all these tigers and stuff when I was traversing through Africa and stuff, but he really just went to the botanical gardens.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Yeah.
like, just be honest, man.
Yeah.
Anywho, tangent.
Yeah. Well, was there any piece while you were doing research for this that you really gravitated towards, you really liked?
One that came to mind, which I can't remember the name, maybe I have it in my phone, was when we went to Dallas not too long ago, for my birthday.
Yeah.
And we saw that painting, and it was a classroom setting, but it's all these different animals taking a class. I just thought that was really fun. It was really well done.
And another bizarre anthropomorphization of animals.
I probably have it on my camera. Yeah, I really like that one. I'm just a big animal lover, so I kind of enjoyed all of it. I definitely enjoyed the nostalgic research, looking at the children's books that my mom would read to me, all those illustrations. Lisa Frank.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, that cat sculpture I really liked. That was a good find. I do like Durst Rabbit. It's a watercolor, not a print, which kind of sets it apart from most of the stuff when you think of Durr.
Well, speaking of that cat sculpture, we didn't even talk about, like, Egyptian symbolism. Like,
right.
Everything means something in their religion and their ancient history. So, like, all the animals across the spectrum in their culture. That's an episode, if not 2 or 3.
Yeah. I mean, same thing with African culture. The cow, bulls, hyenas, coyotes, things like that.
South America too.
Yeah.
If you look at Aztec and Mayan.
Anzazi, the stories of Anzazi.
Yeah.
Spider and tiger, which represented. They both represent like aspects of humanity, like the gods.
Spider meant like stories or something about the web, right?
Yeah, and Sazi was like the trickster storyteller. I think in African myth. I might have that wrong.
I only know that from. I know very little about African mythology, and what little I know is told through other stories.
Yeah.
That have like manipulated and changed over. Not manipulated, but definitely changed the story over time.
I read some Neil Gaiman books where he
I know, I was thinking of American Gods.
But that's where, that was my first introduction to those kind of stories and what led me to actually look up and read some of the African myths.
But again, I feel like it all comes down to childhood too, because I remember reading those fantasy books as a kid, like the Fairy Wars and the Mortal Secrets of Nicholas Flamel. Like, they're young adult, if not kid stories, but they tell these great mythos.
Right.
Which the mythos incorporate animals, and it's just so fun to me because it's slightly different from one series to the other, but not so different that you can't tie them.
Right.
Or you can't already inherently know the background about that character.
Yeah, I mean, that's the important part about using those archetypes from those stories, is that you have that familiarity and recognizing, oh, a pixie is a fairy, and then like how those stories change and develop over time.
Like mermaids in Peter Pan versus a siren.
Right.
In a darker comic, like, yeah, they're both mythological creature. One might be nicer than the other, but the mermaids in Peter Pan were still joking about drowning Wendy.
Right.
Like, the same heart of the mermaid is there.
Yeah.
Just slightly nicer.
Yeah. The same thing with like the red cap, which like, oh, it's a little red capped pixie and it runs around and it's fun to talk to and play with. Or it's the red cap, the one that drags its hat through the blood of children to turn it red.
I've never heard that.
Them, yeah.
Is that like the elves in Hilda? Don't they wear red hats?
Kind of. I don't know. I don't remember Hilda.
Then the Netflix show.
Oh, no, not like that, because they're not murdering people.
That we know of yet. They haven't released the next season.
No, but you do get those kind of stories. They develop and change over time, and it's something that like those kind of mythological creatures showing up in a contemporary sense is always interesting to see, because you have that association to the mythology.
There was a frog drawing I found doing research for this. It was a Japanese print, and I think it was Matsumoto. I don't remember exactly the name, but he just looked like a grumpy frog, and I thought it was the funniest thing. But when you think about it, like in Japan, you have all those rice fields, and it's very swampy, so yeah, there would be a ton of frogs, but like that cultural difference, when I think of frogs, I think of the bayou, I think it's backwoods Texas, but seeing a Japanese print of it, it bridges that gap, that's why I get so excited about art, because it's commonality, and it's about reaching across those differences.
Yeah, I mean, even if you think about, like, you mentioned a frog drawing, and I thought of Spirited Away, where they have all those different depictions of anthropomorphized spirits as, like, this frog spirit wearing the traditional Japanese garb. Just, like, that kind of humorous depiction. That's pretty funny.
Or Fantasia, even.
Yeah.
I loved that movie as a kid. And, when you think of ballerinas, you think of graceful, you think of slim and sleek. They had hippopotamuses and tutus just twirling around. That comedy, it helps bring that classical music to children in such a fun way. And seeing a hippo on its hind legs dancing to Tchaikovsky or whatever.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
And alligators. The alligators were their partners.
Yeah. One other thing we should talk about when we're talking about animals in art is that very, very old school depiction of animals, some of the first depictions, which are the cave drawings. You'll see things like in the Bull and the Shash caves in Paris. There's a mammoth drawing in the Peck Merle caves. And these are some of the oldest depictions we have by people. And like the importance of how important animals were to us as a people growing up in our cultures as they developed, that we took the time to try to immortalize them and
immortalize the
them.
Stories too.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't just drawing the animals like, oh, I saw this today. They were drawing the hunt.
Right.
Themselves killing this tiger, killing this mammoth. They were saying, I'm here. I killed this thing so my family could eat. Like, they were really proud, which they should be.
Yeah.
There's no way I could do that.
Yeah, that's when you take in our history class and they go back and you do your Stone Age to 300 BC course and whatever. That's always where it starts, is usually with your cave paintings, and then it goes into the Miss Willendorf. Like that early depiction, even just like the line quality they use and the fact that they're doing charcoal on a cave wall.
That too, and it's they think that's the first print as well. Not just the first drawing, the first painting, the first print, because they have those handprints where they would put the hand on the wall, they would spit the ink at their hand and then remove the hand. That's a print.
Yeah, the hand's the matrix.
Exactly. Like, it's fascinating. We think of these people as so primitive, so stupid, basically. That is engineering. That is thinking outside of the box at the earliest level.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, art's cool. Well, I think that's a good place to end, is with the beginning. So thank you for joining us today for our little tangent on animals.
We did really good this episode, I feel like. We were on point.
I feel like when I go back and edit, that's not going to hold up.
I feel like you won't have to edit a lot. I'm going to bet money on this.
You can just pay up now.
But thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, I am Andrew Molcheski.
I am Joanna Bolsons.
And hopefully you are you.
And this is Minky.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. It means so much that you would take the time to listen to us. If you like what you hear and would like to help us out, please like, comment, and subscribe. We want to have a conversation, and sometimes that means that as we talk about things, we might make mistakes, like in the pronunciation of names or the misattribution of statements or a piece of work, and messing up titles and dates. If we do, and we notice, we'll put a correction in the show notes, and if we don't, please let us know so we can.
We invite you to join the conversation, so please get in contact. Email us your favorite artwork, ask us to explore a specific artist, or ask how something is made. You can find us at www.artsplanations.com. There you can also find out more about us, the show, and each episode. You'll be able to find out every artist, quote, and most of the specific vocabulary we use in each episode, as well as a list of upcoming topics. If you are curious about our artwork, the best place to find us is on our Instagram and other social medias, which are linked through the Artsplanation website.
We would also like to thank the Joy Drops and Free Music Archive for our music.